we're few but proud in the church today. But hopefully we've got a lot of folks joining us remotely. I know we did last time. Let me see here. So this is the second part of a session on poetry, kind of through Unity principles. I think I called it When the Poem Writes Back, kind of based on how poetry serves as meditation for me. So let's jump right in. Last time we talked about some metaphysical purposes of poetry and why one might write poems. I shared a poem by Thich Nhat Hanh, great Buddhist teacher, and that was a poem that intended to teach. Of course, he's a teacher, and everybody wants to know what he thinks about things, so that made a lot of sense, that he would write a teaching poem. You can also write a poem to muse or ruminate about mystery or the world. And then sometimes you write a poem to dwell in mystery. So the act of writing is a way of kind of inhabiting mystery. And that's what I'm talking about today is, I don't know what we have to look at that. Kind of writing that intends to let you inhabit mystery. And we have, in this church, we do a lot of meditating. Meditating, as you know, it's frequently about emptying yourself and sort of being receptive and sensing, and poetry has something in common with that. We could come to the page with a lot of preconceived ideas about what we want to write, or we can come to the page empty and willing to be a vessel for whatever shows up. I think it's nice that Unity dwells in mystery, unlike some other Christian religions, denominations. We commonly look at Bible stories as metaphors. In fact, the last time Sue, our minister, was here, she mentioned that fish represent ideas. So when Jonah then is consumed by a giant fish, it's kind of like being just overtaken by your thinking, by your ideas. We talked about being fishers of men, and multiplying fish to feed the hungry. That's what the Bible kind of is, right? A multiplication of ideas that are put out there to give sustenance. So the fish, that's just one example of a metaphor in the Bible. And you know, Jesus was surrounded by fisher people, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, all fishermen among his disciples. So, of course, we see that metaphor a lot. Poetry, too, I kind of think of it as casting and then pulling from these murky depths of the subconscious something that's worth holding up to the light, that has scales, that glints, and that's, worth examining. I have a picture here of a funny fish called a red-lipped batfish. Some of your poems are kind of equivalent of this. We don't like to pull a beautiful angelfish from the deep, but some of mine are just horrors. And some of them can be salvaged, and some are meant to be horrors.
That looks like a total come back in between the turtle and the fish.
Yeah, it does, and it has these big lips,
Yeah.
like somebody today who gets the treatments to make their lips big, kind of reminds me of, and kind of a beehive hairdo. There's a picture of a fish here that's kind of shocking looking. Okay, so a good example in the Bible of how we're asked to think metaphorically is Noah's Ark, right? What a ridiculous story. That is, if you think it's just a retelling of the news, if you think that is a hard news story about an ark, we know its dimensions. 510 feet. That's about the size of 1.5 football fields. And we also know that we have a lot of species. They came 2 by 2, and the Bible also says some of them came in groups of 7. So all these species, I read in the International Union, oh, I don't have my mic. Hello everybody, I'm starting over now. Not really. Poetry, you're all caught up. Oh gosh. In 2022, the International Union for Conservation of Nature said that there are 2.16 million species on Earth, and that includes, we can figure the fish could take care of themselves in a deluge, and maybe they weren't that concerned about preserving ticks or whatever. Even birds, though, can't just fly for 40 days and 40 nights. They would have had to have space on this ark for all this stuff, right? Maybe they had fewer species then. That makes sense too. I know I have a Pomeranian. They probably didn't have Pomeranians on the ark. They had some proto dog on the ark. But again, we don't think there probably was an ark. It doesn't make a lot. Yeah,
They found it.
they found the ark.
And, yeah, there was a video about it. There was a Russian pilot that found it.
Yeah.
And they sent an exploration, and they marked it and measured it, and they have all the records. And then
Elby's saying they found the ark. I do remember some story about finding a boat.
it has cracked because there was an avalanche and it cracked. But Marco Polo talks about going to see it on his way to China.
Yeah.
So
Marco
it
Polo
wasn't-
talks about seeing it on the way to China. Now, I'm not saying there was never a big boat.
Right.
I'm saying that 2.16 million times
Right.
2 or
Yeah.
possibly 7.
Yeah.
That's by comparison, the Dickerson Park Zoo is 55 acres and holds only 160 species, and that's 2.4 million square feet. So that's our local ark. Hi. So we're forced to think of Noah's Ark as a metaphor if it's to make any sense to us as people of faith, right? The story we've been given as one of our sacred stories. We can't believe that 2 of each animal were in this space, tended by, 7 people or something like that. So we're forced to think metaphorically, or else it's nonsense that's worthless, right? And poetry thinks metaphorically and goes kind of into those deep waters of the subconscious and makes sense.
I would almost seem
What's
to
that?
think that would be that they would have had multiple arcs to put all the animals in instead of just one specific vessel.
Brenda is bringing up a very practical concern that you don't want to put the lions and the lambs in the same pen. They're probably different parts of the ark. So we could try to make kind of a logical sense of the ark in multiple ways, and that's a fun activity. Logic kind of says, let's think of it as a lesson to be learned that has to do, well, what would the ark kind of symbolize? What would the water symbolize? Something being just overtaken, the world we know being overtaken by some force. I think in our lives we've had that feeling that something big has kind of taken over, and this ark is some vessel that can navigate us through it. We believe maybe the ark is we're kind of given divine tools that we need to survive. We can use our intellect to make a plan, 2 by 2, right? We can make sense of things, and we can navigate storms. That's one possible metaphorical reading of the ark. And of course there are others. I thought I'd read a poem of mine about the ark. If I can find it. I have a little series of poems about suicide, and they're all kind of rooted in Old Testament stuff. I wrote these when I was ebulliently happy. they're like, I'm the happiest I've ever been, and I'm writing these suicide poems, and I don't know what that's about, but that's where the murky waters took me when I wrote this. So I'm kind of imagining the arc from the outside in this poem. Maybe I'll put my camera on. Whoops. There's the coffee. Okay. Death by water. You imagine the arc from the outside, the way most people saw it, shuttered, huge, already starting to stink. And there you are beside it, treading water, reaching to touch its hull, your throat raw from pleading. Most of us lead dry lives, which is why this is the death we were born to. Inside, we're water and bones, and so we bob on the waves like a bag of sticks. Once, all humanity was a forest felled. You can put your head under and remember, didn't you surge into this world on a wave, crying, your mouth full of salt? So that's me kind of pondering the arc story, and I got something different about it than what I just described. I was kind of focusing on maybe a God who would let people just tread water until they can tread no more, while ticks are on the ark, I guess. So might have left that one at home, right? So that's just kind of my arc poem. Let me see here. So I talked a little bit last time about the writing process and how it's a form of meditation. And I mentioned the notion that I have that sometimes when you write, there's like another hand that writes back from under the paper, and I see that as the creator's hand or God's hand, source. But and it doesn't happen every time you sit down to write that something comes through, some brilliance beyond you, some inspiration. Sometimes you're just doing the work. But if you don't do the work, that presence never shows up. You gotta sit down and do that work to get the value of it. Just like meditation, you might sit down, literally sit, and your brain's all over the place, and nothing takes off. And then sometimes it's like, whoa, what just happened in there? And that's what keeps us in the game. That's what keeps us sitting. Although there's value to just being quiet, but there's blows your mind when you have a experience. So writing process works this way. You may start, like I said, with an idea. You'd like to describe this thing. Often it starts with no idea. And I think that can be extremely fruitful for the poet if you sit down and you're just a catcher's mitt, ready for whatever wants to whiz into it or plop into it, or the grounder that you scoop up. But poems find you in all different ways, right? And then you sit, and I call it butt work. To me, I've said this many times, there's really no such thing as writer's block. It's more like butt block. Writer's schlock or writer's crock sometimes shows up, the stuff that seems like it's not worth anything. But if you have something on the page, there's always something to fix. And sometimes you can fix it quite handsomely into a poem that works quite beautifully. And sometimes all you've done is put in your reps in the gym, the poetry gym, and you've built the poetry muscle, so maybe next time will go better. I've mentioned too the mind-body connection. I like to write by hand, and that just, there's a big blood vessel going from your heart to your hand, and to me that matters kind of, to have that sort of physical connection to the page. Although I do like to demystify poetry and try it all kinds of other ways too. So if I feel like I can only write with a blue pen on a legal pad, I try to type it, or I try to write with a pencil, or I try to write on the back of an envelope, just to show that I'm beyond the tools. My tool, my inherent gift is greater than the tools I have for it. Now, poetry also relies on revision. It's revising where the poetry happens. the stuff that spills out of your brain, a lot of people are satisfied to leave it at that, and sometimes it's quite beautiful. Sometimes things do come to you fully formed. I'm thinking of Wordsworth wrote a poem called Tintern Abbey, lines composed a few miles above Tintern. It's a big long title. We call it Tintern Abbey. He went on a hike and composed it while walking and came back and wrote it down, and that was Tintern Abbey. Didn't really need any more work after that. And sometimes you receive things kind of whole, but usually the artistry happens in the revising. So I'll revise also by hand to keep the mind-body connection going, and then I also will at some point shift over to a keyboard so I can see what it's lining up like on the page and what it looks like, because frankly sometimes you want your poem to look, well, I want my poems to look intentional, not to have a big dog leg, or I just want my poems to have a shape that makes sense, because that tells me that ideas make sense too, so that's part of revision. And then the last step of writing a poem is finding an audience. Like I just read you my ARC poem, that poem's not done until it's heard. It's maybe been a good meditation tool to write it, but it hasn't communicated anything until there's an audience. So I think finding the audience is part of the writing process. So like I said, I go into it with emptiness, ideally, and the most fruitless writing times I have are when I have a concept that I'd like to wrestle into submission. There is genius in the waters, and I do want to reel in the big one, or at least the weird one, like the big lip batfish we just saw. And that's kind of my process. We have a guest here, a friend of mine, who just wrote me this morning and said, well, I think I'll come. So of course I'm using him. So this is his lovely wife Cindy, and this is Bob Stevens. You might remember his name if you've been in Springfield for a while. He was our mayor not too awful long ago. And now he's the leader of a group I'm in called Bards of Moon City, kind of poetry group. And I have asked him to maybe share a poem that connects with the metaphysical in some way, since that's sort of our topic. So, and he said he'd be willing to, because we poets are always willing. We like to be asked, right? So I'm gonna have Bob come up here and read a poem, and then we're gonna ask him about it a little bit.
You need this on?
Yeah, that'd be good. I hope he's got your mic. And I'm gonna hear from all of you. Did anybody else bring a poem today? Do I see a hand? No. Jerry, I thought I saw your hand up.
Where do you need me to be?
Let's see. Why don't you stand where I was,
Okay.
and then we'll be able to see you. I'll make sure of this. Is your mic on? Yeah, that's a good spot.
Should be on.
You can sit too if you want. All
The
right.
poem is called The Eyes of Old Town.
You have to keep that mic pretty close.
I turned the corner.
Hey, put the mic close to your.
I turned the corner and stepped into Old Town. It was my first visit to Albuquerque, and I suddenly felt odd, decombobulated. I stopped walking, looking around, and found myself nibbling on my lower lip, feeling I had been here before. It was a strange deja vu moment. I felt a sudden warm sensation of having come home, of finally being where I belonged. Even the young teenager with long hair who walked a little apart from her family seemed familiar as they turned the corner and came toward us. My wife kept looking at me strangely as I repeatedly stopped and looked around with a confused look on my face. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "It just feels funny." My voice trailed off to a mumble. Whether I was fighting them or trying to remember the vague memories that I couldn't pinpoint, I don't know. It was like I had lived in this town before. The color of the adobe buildings, the buildings with the waist-high walls, the very odors of the neighborhood felt so familiar, but still far removed from my life in Missouri. "It just feels like I've been here before," I told her. "Are you sure you haven't been here for a conference or something?" "No, that's not what I mean. I mean I've been here before. It feels like I've lived here before. She looks at me like she does when I'm injured or sick, concerned and anxious. It was like I was remembering a dream from a long time in the past, or trying to. A passage I had read in a book, but you can't remember the smells of a neighborhood from a book. The young girl glanced at us as she and her family passed us there on the sidewalk. She had long hair, a bit wavy, and walked with an amazing style and grace for a teenager. There was something about her, maybe the curious look in her eyes, that made me stare at her briefly. It was more than just a glance. There was an odd feeling I couldn't identify. Did I know her? Had we met before? Did she know me? As we looked at each other momentarily, she stared at me with eyes that seemed far older than her face. And even though she was attractive in a youthful, not quite mature way, there was something more, a feeling that she and I weren't finished, that this was not simply a case of encountering another tourist family in a touristy venue. I don't remember how many there were in her family as they passed, but I remember those eyes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yay.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, what prompted that poem? The event, obviously, you wanted to capture. What made you sit down and write a poem about it?
I try to find topics that I have somehow experienced and that can lead to a story of some type. And I tend to choose poetry because I've tried writing novels, I've tried writing essays, I've written a lot of training manuals.
Poetry's a training manual.
Tend to be a person of fewer words, although my wife might disagree with that. But poem, I go back to Samuel Taylor Coleridge's definitions, the difference between prose and poetry. And he said that prose consisted of words in their best order, but poetry consisted of the best words in their best order. So I think of poetry as being subtractive. You splash a lot of words down, and then you start taking words out till you're left with the best words in the best order.
Yeah. Now, I think it was Yeats who called poets the unacknowledged legislators of the world. You had this political life, and you were a poet while you were the mayor. So, did your poet mind ever influence your mayoral mind?
I think it influenced those times where I stood up on my hind legs and made comments. Most of the time, I would be saying things like, "Will you please vote?" And after giving everybody else on council an opportunity to talk. But there were a few times during my 8-year career on council that I did choose to speak, and that's where writing poetry, helped me with those statements, because I would splash a lot of words down, and then I would start taking words out until it was fairly short and pithy.
8 years is 4 terms, the max.
That's true.
So did poetry influence your politicking, your campaigning?
It did, and politicking influenced my poetry, and it's all interrelated.
Yeah, because you have to be able to talk to lots of different people,
Oh, sure.
and maybe
In
poetry.
fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was having lunch with one of the poets in our bars group, and we were walking out after lunch, and I ran into a retired minister that had been a minister during my tenure on council, and I stopped to say hello. And the lady I was with asked me, she said, "Do you ever go anywhere where you don't know anyone?" And I'm going, "Well, it's fairly rare, because I was on the front page a lot just because of my position as mayor, and a lot of people know who I am, and I've never met them, I don't know who they are, but it's always an interesting interaction."
I became good friends with Bob, but the first time I ever saw him was with Cindy on one of the Christmas events, the tree lighting ceremony, and you know, that's sort of fun to think of you then. Anybody have any questions for Bob before we let him go? We can also come back to him. So, thank you. You can give that to LB. I feel like you might have something to say, LB. Is there anything on your mind? There'll be other opportunities, but it kind of looked like you had a thought. No thoughts right now.
Well, other than we have a bard coming next week for a concert.
Oh, yeah.
And I have been going back and re-listening to his music this week, and there isn't anything he doesn't talk about. And one of his songs is I Think of God as a Poet.
Oh, yeah.
And he writes with a pencil because he can erase, because that's the best way to be in our lives, is to erase our mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Remind
that's
me of his name.
Greg Tamlin.
Greg Tamlin. Not a Bards of Moon City, but a Bard.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he has songs about everything in the world. There's one whole CD that's about relationships, and he's just that kind of a person. So, anyway, just a plug for Greg.
Is that next week that he's coming?
Yes, it is next week, and he's doing the morning service, and then we have a potluck luncheon so that everybody stays, and the concert's at 1 o'clock.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay, well, that's a good reminder. I want to transition into Myrtle Fillmore, because she has some things to say about this topic that we're talking about.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So do you think a poem can be authentic if you write it on a keyboard?
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah, it's just I value the physical thing about it, but it's still physical to type, and the physical thing that I value is only a tiny part of it. It's the ideas. Some people can't write by hand. Some people don't have hands. It would be kind of ableist to say it can only happen with the physical connection when people maybe can't even do that. That's just sort of my personal process. It's so important to remember that, isn't it? That, you know, you make these pronouncements and you have to remember not everybody's equipped to do things your way. There must be other ways that are good and valid. So I have some thoughts here from Myrtle. Some of you, this is not it. Let me see. I had a little handout, but it won't come up because we don't have Word. So, this is Myrtle Fillmore, founder of Unity, and I'll say this for Bob and Cindy specifically, and anybody watching. Unity comes out of the New Thought movement, which sounds brand new, but it's transcendentalism basically is New Thought. So I think Emerson, and that's kind of the movement that we come out of. And Myrtle Fillmore was our founder, and she shaped a lot of the thinking of the church. So here's what she has to say about developing our faculties. The only way to abide in cosmic consciousness is to develop Christ consciousness, the abiding realization of oneness with God-mind, thank you, and of its ideas as directing all the faculties and fulfilling the divine purpose in being. All true followers of Jesus Christ are required to discipline the human self in the journey from the personal to the Christ consciousness. The human part of us wants to cling to things visible to other people, but as the impersonal spiritual Christ finds expression, we gradually cease to lean upon these material limitations. I should say, for me, what Myrtle Fillmore is saying has to do with kind of moving beyond our personal obsessions and trying to like connect to something bigger. I think that's where she's going with this. Our spiritual faculties become so strong, vital, and substantial that we're able to contact the great invisible through them. That's a great sentence. Our spiritual faculties become so strong, vital, and substantial that we're able to contact the great invisible through them. She's saying we can strengthen our faculties through practice, right? Like the poetry practice I'm suggesting, you might want to give it a try. And then we are able to contact the great invisible. When these faculties are well developed, the invisible reality becomes to us even more real and substantial and enduring than material things are to the senses. It's interesting because in writing, we always try to be very concrete and make sure that we include the material things. I don't think she would say that's a bad idea because she talks about materiality too. Here's further in her letter. In the development of faculties and powers, talents, and self-expression through them, and in the service to others that one must consider in order to be truly successful and satisfied, one must go to God mind to learn what is truly best for the soul at the time. Sometimes the soul will get into a rut through the desire to excel in some particular line, disregarding development along other lines. As a poet, I'm reading line very literally, but she means like, line of work or something. We need all our faculties awake and alert to discern the reality of being and to see through the becoming things to the underlying cause and to eventual order and perfection. We find that a daily development of all our faculties keeps us better balanced. So here's me trying to turn you into a poet, and here's Myrtle saying, yeah, do that. I think that's what she's saying. And what do you guys think of what Myrtle just said? Any reaction? Got more Myrtle to share. There's no immediate reaction. She also has a letter called The Subconsciousness, which of course is like absolutely related to what we're talking about now.
For anybody who is wanting to look at this deeper, where would you find this material?
I found it on truthunity.net. They have a collection of letters of Myrtle Fillmore, and the first one was on developing our faculties, and this one is about, that we're going into, is about the subconsciousness. It's
So
from
that's at
1936.
truthunity.com.
Truthunity.net, I think. Yeah, .net.
Okay,
So,
truthunity.net.
yeah. Myrtle
Thank you.
Fillmore has some important things to say about developing our faculties. So, Jerry, did you have, Jerry wants the mic.
Just real quick.
I gotta hear what Jerry has to say.
I seem to be discovering things every week. This is a wonderful, wonderful life that I'm living at the moment, okay?
Yeah,
Uh,
casting your net into the waters.
The thing is that it keeps coming back to me empty. And then I started really thinking about it. Emptiness, stillness, isness is all that there really is.
Yeah.
All of this. I was a physics professor, was writing that 99.99% of everything is space. And whenever you're looking around, we project upon that space. Okay? And so I'm starting to find, and I think I'll probably write a poem or two.
Give it a
Is
try.
that the reason being is that the more I discover him, I find it in my own stillness. And a gentleman said that its name should be stillness, because it's in the stillness that you meet him. It's like we use the word subconscious. No, that's higher conscious. It's above our consciousness, our conscious. It's higher. And so we're going higher. We're not going into something that there's nothing much lower than we are, in a sense,
Ticks.
okay?
I'm making a case for ticks today.
Well, at the same time, there's a vibration that they don't exist. And if you live in that higher vibration, and you work on it and you bring that higher vibration into your life, a lot of these little pests disappear. And it's not just because they're gone, it's just because you don't resonate with it anymore. It's just like illness. All illnesses are me being fearful of something. That's all it is. And so all of my personal healing will be done inside me, by not having that fear of anything in my life. But at the same time, I've already decided my own suicide. I already know there's a day that's coming, and I have nothing that I can say or do about it, but I don't fear that day. You know, that's just a day of transition. And so what I find is the freedom that a person can truly find in understanding the isness of all things. Because it just is. It is what it is. So, anyway.
Does anybody else think Jerry is wasting his time not writing a poem every single day? Jerry's life is a poem. He needs to write this stuff down. And you know, Jerry's pointing out that higher conscious of the creator of the divine is not the same as the subconscious, but it's kind of like that water reflecting, right? It's a emptiness that you can kind of go into, and it's the best you have maybe to get there. So.
Remember, water is level. It always reaches the lowest level spot, correct?
Yes.
So there's no difference anywhere across that medium. And that's the wonderful part about stillness. You know, if you breathe, feel yourself breathing, see your lungs breathing, and then you start realizing that I have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
That this thing, and he doesn't care that I call it a thing, that I'm paddling around with in this world, all right, is his. He's given it to me to create an experience that I can have. But this is all on automatic.
Yeah.
And it's in that automatic that you find him. It's in your heart, it's in your lungs, it's in your liver. The more you learn to feel and hear what it is, you realize that you are and you are not that. I'm separate in a sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And Brenda has a thought, right?
Well, I'm not very good at writing, so if I've been using this as put my thoughts down,
Mm-hmm.
I'll get out my laptop and I'll start typing my thoughts down on it. And I find it's just as rewarding as back whenever I was going to World Transitions and the NAMI Hope Center and doing poetry there. I found that typing stuff out on my laptop it just was rewarding and therapeutic as writing.
We've been sold a bill of goods about poetry, that you have to know verb tenses and where the comma goes, and that this brilliance that you put on the page, and some people can't write at all, so
Yeah.
they send into space, right?
Yeah.
That counts, and it doesn't have to have an editor for that to be.
So I found, and it's also real, if I'm having some psychological difficulties on a day, I find getting out the laptop and living on the internet for a while and writing down my thoughts that way is a lot of times more therapeutic than taking medication or going to a support group.
Yeah. well put. There is I mean, we've been making the comparison between poetry and meditation, and I'm calling it a form of meditation, but there is a therapeutic element to both of those things, and makes you feel good. Sometimes it makes me feel awful, but then that's kind of good. So, you have a thought, Cedar, right? Is
Yeah,
yours?
Cedar, yeah. So, just kind of an interesting little side note. I've been needing to write for a really long time. I've always been a writer, but I kind of put it off when I started my business. But recently I've just been getting that push to start writing again, just very insistently.
Mhm.
And I had no idea what the class was going to be about today. And I fully expected to sleep through class this morning, but somehow woke up really early this morning and just happened to open the Unity newsletter and saw that it was a class about writing, and just immediately was like, oh, there's my push, I gotta go. So anyways, just wanted to share that little synchronicity that happened this morning.
Thank you for not sleeping. Over here. That's great. And Cedar just started a business, right, on Glenstone, kind of by Dancing Mule, right? What's it called?
Mystical Thoughts, it's metaphysical shop.
Mystical Thoughts.
Mystical Thoughts, Metaphysical Shop.
Yeah. And, I write for the Business Journal. That's my day job. And I've come to find that it's kind of interesting being a Unity person and being hired to be a business journalist. I didn't think there'd be much of a connection, but what I've come to find is that every business is a manifestation, right? Somebody had an idea, even a failed business, for a brief shining moment, it was manifest in the world. That's as magical as thinking can get, to create something. So your creative efforts, you haven't been writing because you've been making a business, well, that's creative stuff. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, there's some reason to believe that when a man does not write his poetry, it escapes by other vents through him, instead of the one vent of writing, clings to his form and manners, whilst poets have often nothing poetical about them except their verses. So isn't that interesting? You've had this other vent, your business.
And I just started compiling my spells to start publishing his poetry. I forgot to.
Oh, wonderful.
So, all at the same time, this little synchronicity happened.
Cedar has started to publish or put together her spells. To explain your spells. Wait, Elvie will give you a.
Just short little magic spells, so just maybe like 6 or 7 lines, and I just use them to manifest, basically. But I realized that these all read like poetry. I need to actually start releasing these.
So you had a magical purpose, but it takes the form of something like poetry.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I sort of think I have a magical purpose, but literal magic doesn't actually manifest. Before we get into this next Myrtle Fillmore reading, let's remember, and if you're not steeped in Unity, we have a statement of faith. We can all say it. Everybody in this church has like a million things that we all know by heart. We can all say, let's show off. There is only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God the good, omnipotent. So we don't believe in devils and hell, and we think there's God the good. Only one presence, God the good. One omnipotent presence. And so that relates to what we're going to read now from Ms. Fillmore. Let me see where I am here. The sensitive soul, sympathetically attuned to the mind and feeling of humanity, suffers greatly when the mental vision opens, at exposing the soul to contact with the experiences of mankind during the past. Pardon all the man talk, by the way. It's just a sign of the times. For this very reason, it is imperative that each truth student should prayerfully seek to enter into the Jesus Christ consciousness of the omnipresence of God, the good. When we can look at life, present and past, through the eyes that see only God and good, we can keep our poise. We see not frenzy of ignorance and anxiety, the mist of seeming failure, the gray of lack of love and wasted life. Rather, we see the warmth and light of the great solar system that is of creative minds planning and that keeps working on the miracle of growth. We see the radiance of the Son of God shining through the Son of Man and men everywhere, perhaps a little here, a little there, but shining surely to bring forth the fruits of his planting. We are the children of the creator of this wonderful universe. I do not believe that the lily feels the terrors of darkness down at the bottom of the pond, nor does it allow the mud and water that shut out much of the light to keep it from appropriating the good that is provided for it and pushing surely and intelligently upward to the freedom and light that were there for it long before the bulb began to swell and to burst. I am sure that the lily is conscious only of the foods in the earth and the warmth and helpfulness of the sun and air. Isn't that beautiful? And poetry, right? I think Myrtle Fillmore writes very poetically. Any response to that? A couple things kind of come to mind. As somebody who learned to write poetry and so a lot of times you go into your first poetry class, English 205 at Missouri State I used to teach, and you start with your trauma because that seems like the poetic stuff. And then you come to Unity and you find out, why are you thinking about your trauma? You're not your trauma. If you thoughts held in mind something after their kind, I forget. What?
Thoughts held in mind produced after their kind.
Thoughts held in mind produced after their kind. So we're practically addicted to not letting that stuff in. How's that working for you, Beth? When you lose somebody close to you, it's very hard not to let the dark thoughts in. And a lot of times the poetry comes from dark places. I've always struggled with this aspect of Unity, that there's no space really for the stuff that hurts because we're trying to move past that. And I've tried to reconcile that. And poetry frequently, especially for beginners, starts with the hurts because that feels like the most pronounced and poignant thing you could write about. So that's something that I've always kind of had to struggle with. But I do take Myrtle Fillmore's thoughts about the lily to heart. It doesn't know anything except the warmth and helpfulness of the sun and air. I think, consider the lilies of the pond. They probably have it about right. So I'm curious, in the room here, what are some of your creative outlets? Anybody have anything they do? Yeah, Dee has something. What do you do?
I make greeting cards,
Oh.
but what really invigorates me is that I have somebody in mind and that the card comes out that kind of expresses either of what we have in common or what we enjoy doing together, or whatever it is.
So this is an art form that incorporates words where you express something important, but also you use these beautiful materials and create something that's a physical work of art too. And
Yeah.
people love them. I've gotten one of your cards before, and they're quite lovely. And here's Beth.
I like to go out and take pictures and just be outside, out in just nature, and just get away from everything for a while and just
Yeah.
focus that way.
What's that do for you?
Just relaxes me, gives me just a sense of calmness and peace.
Connection,
Yeah.
creation. Yeah.
Especially now, hopefully the weather's starting to get cool, I'll be able to go out and do that more. So.
Yes. We're all held captive by Missouri heat.
We enjoy your pictures.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It's interesting that you said to get away from everything, because we're not getting away from anything, we're getting into something different. So we're changing our frame of reference, but our mindset is to leave the other things behind. And it just listening to the way that we phrase things, it's like, that just kind of triggered me. I was like, what? I'm not getting away from something, you're getting towards something. But I see, you can see it both ways, and I think that's part of looking at the poet, is being able to see different perspectives. I spend a lot of time with Don and Wendy, and he just finished another poem last week, and Wendy's like, man, I can't keep up, because she makes a collage for every poem that he writes, and so they have it in a book with the collage, which wouldn't be able to be printed because it's from magazines and a lot of those pictures are copyrighted, but they illustrate the concepts of his poems, and he's written over 1,000. He's got 3 books that are actually published, and he's working on more stuff. And he had just finished a poem, and so Wendy's going, yep, gotta do another collage to keep up with him. But watching his process, and there was one point where he thought, there's no more ink in my pen, which is another one of Greg's songs. But yet, it wasn't very long, a couple of months, and now he's writing like almost every day.
He's
When
kind
he's-
of the poet laureate of Unity of Springfield.
When he's not making birdhouses and doing mosaic plaques and playing games, and I mean, they're doing creative things all the time, and it's just interesting to watch how that develops in a person on a weekly basis, because I see them almost every single week.
Well, maybe you have some insight into Don. What do you think poetry gives to him?
When he first woke up with poems coming into his mind, it scared him. He went to a psychologist or psychiatrist and said, I think I'm losing my mind. And she said, no, you're not. Go home and write poetry. He had worked in a science lab all his life. It never used that creative part of his brain before. And I think it just opened up a whole new world to him, and I don't think he'd done the artwork and stuff before. And so it's just opened him up into a totally different person, where he is looking at, a lot of his poems are connections to his higher self coming through and looking at the world with such a different perspective that it brings that otherworldliness into this existence.
We're kind of lucky today, kids are, because I said we, and it's kids, because I, of course, am a kid. But, like, my younger son goes to Jarrett Middle School, which is called a STEAM Academy, and that's STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math. And they've added the A, kind of hooked on after the fact, the arts. Now we see the arts as kind of part and parcel of the kind of creative maundering that leads to scientific discovery. How old's Don? He wouldn't have had anything like that. That was decades from his time in school to have any kind of STEAM.
93 or 94
Yeah.
in next month.
So now we see a connection. He probably had to partition that part from himself a little bit, maybe. And by the way, you're a very creative person. I don't have quite a bead on you, but I see it in what you wear. I hear you talk about your plants. What's your creative outlet, LD?
Right now, it's being pretty much channeled into my house and my yard.
Yeah, which counts.
My house has a 12-foot ceiling that's painted blue with clouds on it
Oh,
and
beautiful.
skylights. And my yard is an expression of nature
Yeah.
that I've got, 50 or 60 monarch milkweed plants, and I've got asters for the monarchs when they come on the return trip in another month or so. My yard is just full of asters, and last year it was just full of monarchs. So it's connecting with nature, and I'm not really very good at it, but I keep plugging.
Yeah. Well, that's good. A lot of people's yards are a monument to no nature at all, just Roundup. So I think you're doing it right. Jerry, what's your creative outlet? Philosophy, I think. What else do you have going?
Oh,
And we're almost out of time. I want to get to everything.
yeah, well, I'll make this real quick. I started seeking when I was 25, and I've never stopped. It is my total and complete involvement of every moment of every day.
Yeah.
I constantly seek and you will find, and I find sometimes it takes a year or two, sometimes I gotta wallow in my own stuff really hard before I go, wow,
Yeah,
I didn't have to do that.
yeah,
And so that's just me is, just being open to everything. At the same time, I hope that I'm not closed either,
yeah,
see, because
yeah.
everyone has their own perspective and their own right to that perspective, and they need to be able to enjoy their perspective as much as they feel they need to do.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, yeah, even when you were talking before about disease being fear, I thought, well, my dad didn't die of pancreatic fear. Like, we can talk about that later, but it's like you had kind of a different take on illness, and that was okay, because we could kind of dwell in that interstice between the understandings.
yeah, the simple word is dis-ease.
Yeah, right.
It's just a simple word.
Yeah.
And
So you have the business stuff. What else do you have going on?
Wire wrapping is my number
Wire
two.
wrapping. Interesting.
It's been my latest kick and what got me into it, but mostly, I don't know if you guys can see it, but these big circle pendants.
Oh, yeah. So you wrap gems
Crystals,
and
yes.
crystals, yeah.
Yep, yep, yep. A lot of gemstones,
Yeah,
but yeah, wire wrapping.
cool. And then Cindy, what do you do? Oh, yeah, Brenda.
Well, the last year or so, I've been focusing on improving the fifth wheel that I live in
Yeah,
and,
kind of like Elby.
and making it more livable and more customizable to the way I use it instead of traveling the country with it. I'm making it more like a destination house or mobile home that you use for that purpose.
Yeah,
And it's rewarding and challenging at the same time.
yeah. Nice to have a creative outlet. You've been working on that for quite a while, I think. And Cindy and Bob, what do you guys do? You have the poetry, Bob. I bet there's more. Cindy, what do you have?
I try to keep Bob out of trouble.
Oh, no. No. Try poetry, Cindy. It'll never work.
We also used to do music. We played in an Irish folk group and actually traveled to Japan one time. But, gotten away from that. Several people have moved out of town. I just don't have the energy to put another band together.
Yeah. Well, a few thoughts about creativity before we head out. We're almost done. We have the announcements too. Albert Einstein says, creativity is seeing what others see and thinking what no one else ever thought. He says, I never made one of my discoveries through the process of rational thinking. Maya Angelou said, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. Like this, what do you call that, a perpetual motion machine. And the great Lama Oprah says, make visible what without you might perhaps never have been seen. So whether we're, making our garden something never before seen, or we're wrapping crystals, or we're philosophizing, or we're making Irish music, or we're writing poetry, that's the goal. Bring something new into the world. So I hope you'll give that a try. Okay, that's my announcements. I'm also dropping my mic. I'm a real tech whiz here. Meditation is tonight at 6. It is open to everyone. I see 3 of us in the room who go regularly to meditation and love it. So, and seeing them is the highlight of my week. The church office will be closed tomorrow in observance of Labor Day.
Yay.
Navigating Grief Support Group will still meet as they do every Monday at 6. That is Beth over here. The Unity Men's Group and Potluck is this Tuesday at 6. They meet the first Tuesday of each month, and all men are welcome to attend. Male identifiers, I suppose. The Mat Makers are meeting every Thursday at 10. They make mats for unsheltered people to sleep on out of store bags. So if you ever have any colorful store bags, they want that. Their goal is to make 100 mats in 100 days, and they'd love your help. Unity Drum Circle this Thursday at 6:30. You could bring a drum. We have drums. Everyone's welcome. You don't have to be a drummer. We're all drummers. There will be no 9:15 adult ed class next Sunday. This will give everyone more time to prepare their dish for our Friendship Sunday potluck, which is right after service. Sign up in the foyer for what you plan to bring. As Elby was saying, Greg Tamlin will be here next Sunday. He'll be doing the talk and music for our service and a concert at 1. He's an award-winning speaker, humorist, singer, songwriter for over 30 years, combining outstanding audience rapport with an irreverent sense of humor. Concert tickets are $20 and can be purchased now or at the door. And next Sunday at 4:30, Jean Andrus will facilitate practical prayer, energy for healing. Participants will observe and then practice energy healing techniques. Paid position open for a webmaster and social media manager, 6 to 10 hours per week. If you're interested or you know someone who's interested, stop by. We also have an email, officeadministrator@unityofspringfield.org. And we have an 8 and 8 donation drive and crisis cold weather shelter open house. It doesn't say when, do you know? Coming up.
It's Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Yeah, a week from this Tuesday.
Not, yeah, not tomorrow,
A week
but
from
first.
this Tuesday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Look,
sounds right.
look for that. We've got stuff online about that, so that's a good thing.
So be the 10th.
The 10th. Okay, having a good authority. D, best authority.
That,
That's the 10th.
that 8 by 8 or whatever Lisa calls it, it helped so much last year.
Oh,
People
yeah.
giving coffee and gloves and hot chocolate and sugar and,
Dee's saying that we have a list of things, and 1 week it'll be coffee, 1 week it'll be granola bars, 1 week it'll be sugar, and that keeps us in stuff for the
and
cold
toilet
weather season.
paper.
And toilet paper. So, as you know, we have, 30 people maybe who spend the night here in this very room when it gets cold out, so, yeah. And that's it. I thank everybody for tuning in or being here in person. Thank you so much.
I guess I pushed the same button, I don't know. Oh, I don't see that, oh, I
Careful
don't
there.
see that blue button.
Well,
Thanks,
Lisa
everyone,
had to
for
come in and do something to save it
comments.
too.